Hello, fantasy football fans. Welcome to the 9 Route, the fantasy football show that goes deep to help you win. I'm your host, Austin Lee, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Alex Miglio. How you doing, man?
Did you forget my name already?
No. I was making it dramatic, announcing you at like the beginning of a basketball game or something like that.
I'm like in this fifth stage of denial from Percy Harvin on Monday night. He's scoring 3 touchdowns that were called back and ruining some of my lineups and leagues. I'm over it. But it was pretty rough on Monday.
It doesn't seem like you're over it. It seems like you're still stewing over it.
I told you I'm in the stages of denial. So.
Yeah. Clearly, that's what's going on here. I think a lot of fantasy owners are feeling burned by that, and I just pretend like it didn't happen because he didn't score them. So I just let it go. Whew.
If you weren't watching the games, you were none the wiser.
Yeah, well, I watched this game, and it was quite amusing. It was like, oh, really? Like, I didn't get that touchdown? Okay, well, let's try again. And then, like, immediately after, another touchdown. Oh, that one's no good? Oh, okay, I see how it is. Yeah, so, well, hopefully that didn't burn too many of our listeners here. I'm sorry if it did. Hopefully Week 6 will treat you more kindly than, Percy Harvin's touchdowns being brought back. So Alex and I, as some of you know, we write over at footballguys.com. We have been doing this podcast together for a couple of years, and we're just excited to be hanging out with you all tonight, or maybe you're listening to it later on iTunes or on Stitcher. But regardless, thank you for listening. Tonight we're going to cover the news and injuries, mostly injuries, cover some of our rankings, and we'll give you our daily fantasy sports picks of the week, including our picks for the Millionaire Maker is back over at DraftKings. So we'll give you our take on that, and we'll also give you a little bit of sort of general daily fantasy advice as we get into that as well. So let's kick things off here, Alex, with our favorite team, the Miami Dolphins. No Sean Moreno. Sounds like he is practicing this week. What do you think? How's this workload going to be split between Moreno and Lamar Miller? They've got a juicy matchup this week versus Green Bay. How do you see the shaking out?
Well, I'll tell you what. It sounds a lot like in the preseason when we were told that the Moreno might miss the entire preseason, and that completely sunk his draft stock, and even more than it did. It was already depressed because of the surgery, and lo and behold, he played in the third week of the preseason, and people got a good deal on him in the first round. The first week of the season, he exploded, and then he got injured again. So I don't know what to believe. All that to say, I don't know what to believe. But if he is back and he's 100% or close to it anyway, I expect it to be very similar to Week 1, where he got a lot of the carries and Miller got a lot of the passing, the receptions, the third down work, that sort of thing. So that gives Moreno a lot of value going forward. I don't know that I trust him this week because we don't know what we're going to get. But I think after, once we see what's going to happen, that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, I'm paying real close attention to these practice reports because if Moreno sounds like he's good to go, I may have to put him higher than Miller in my rankings, even though Miller has looked pretty good in Moreno's absence. I think you're right. I think Miami's intended use for these guys rest of season is for Moreno to be the first and second down back and Miller to be the passing down back. So, I think Moreno is going to get more snaps here and ultimately more fantasy points and have more value rest of season here. Would you agree that Moreno's the guy you want rest of season?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to choose between the two, I think that Moreno, of course, all things being equal in terms of health, will be the guy to own. I do think that Miller will retain some value in PPR leagues. I think he's going to catch, get 4 or 5 targets a game, and kind of retain that same role that he had in Week 1, maybe score a touchdown. I mean, he did score a touchdown in Week 1 where Moreno didn't, but I would rather have Moreno.
Yeah, I think both of them are startable this week versus Green Bay, who's one of the worst rush defenses in the league. Going forward, you might find yourself thinking Moreno's like a low-end RB2 and Miller's maybe like a flex play. But it's interesting. I think Miami's going to run the ball enough that both of these backs could have value the rest of the season. A bigger name that's in the news is Calvin Johnson. He's been kind of a decoy the past couple of weeks. He is dealing with a high ankle sprain, and it sounds like they may sit him this week. What are you hearing about Calvin Johnson, and how do you think this affects the Detroit Lions' passing attack?
I don't know that we talked about this last week or the week before where it said somebody asked a question about sitting your studs, and we said you kind of have to start no matter what. But with Calvin Johnson, I think that's an exception because he hasn't done anything in the last 2 weeks. It sounds like he's going to be out this week. I'm not sure if he's officially out or not. I know that even Yahoo is listing him as out right now, and even if he goes, I'm not sure how well he's going to play, but that ankle sprain is really affecting him. So I would go ahead and go with a different option this week.
Yeah, I think one of our Twitter followers, Jill, was asking that question. She's like, I just really hope he's inactive because I've got these other decent receivers that I could start, and if he's inactive, I don't have to make the decision. But if he's active, I have this tough choice between him and, say, another top 25 receiver. And from what we've seen the past couple of weeks, I think they're going to sit him. I don't think he's going to play. But if he's active, I would go with another top 25 option this week. And I don't ordinarily say that. I go with the philosophy you mentioned last week, which was start your studs. If it's a top caliber guy and he's active, you put him in there to see what happens. But this is a case where I hope they rest him this week. Now, if he sits, is this a golden opportunity for Golden Tate?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that he's gonna go nuts, but I think that it's a good opportunity for him. Yes, a golden one, as you so poorly put it.
I couldn't help it. I'm sure someone else out there has made the same.
The required pun of the week. So.
Yeah, exactly. I had to get it out of the way, really. Well, I mean, Tate, he had 7 catches for 134 yards and a touchdown in Week 5. Calvin Johnson was, a decoy and hurt in this game, and Reggie Bush left with an injury in this game. So maybe it's not quite the same scenario, but with Calvin Johnson out, Golden Tate seems to be showing that he can be a reliable target here. I mean, is he a top 20 receiver with Calvin out?
If Calvin's out, I think I would put him in the top 20, that's for sure. I don't think I'd put him in the top 10. I think Minnesota's got some pretty good defensive backs. Xavier Rhodes, in particular, I think could be blanketing Tate, and so I don't love him, but I think that he could have a top 20 week.
Yeah, I think what we saw last year out of Matthew Stafford is when Calvin Johnson was not in the lineup, the whole Detroit offense sort of tanked, and Stafford wasn't worth playing. I think maybe what I'm getting with having Tate in there is not necessarily that Tate's a top 10 play, but that Stafford still has value even without Johnson. Not as much value, but it's not a no-brainer get Stafford out of your lineup at all costs like I felt like it was with a couple of games last year.
Well, I mean, Stafford last week didn't have a good game in terms of fantasy, so even if Tate is startable, I don't know that Stafford is necessarily startable. I bumped him down in my rankings. He's barely in my. I think he's number 10 right now in my rankings, and I'm kind of thinking about it based on some of the other guys that are out there. So it's kind of tough to tell about Stafford.
Yeah. I'm not saying necessarily start him, but it's maybe not as abysmal as it was last season.
It won't be so bad.
Yeah, not as bad. And another big-name receiver who's in the news today, A.J. Green, was carted off in practice today after he re-injured his toe. What are you hearing about A.J. Green, and what does this do for the rest of the Cincinnati passing attack?
It's a big bummer for anybody who owns A.J. Green because he was just coming back to form last week. He had the touchdown, even with a tough matchup, and I think that it's. I don't even know what to say. It's awful. It stinks for the entire offense. I think that Giovanni Bernard, I think, probably benefits the most here. Sigmund Bloom tweeted to me earlier today when I talked about maybe grabbing Marvin Jones, who I didn't realize he had actually hurt himself again last week when I said that, but I thought it was kind of a sneaky pickup, and he's not going to probably go this weekend. So Bloom said that it's probably the running game that's going to benefit both Giovanni Bernard. He thinks Jeremy Hill's going to benefit big time.
Yeah, I think we could see a lot of work from both of these running backs. And also, I think Mohamed Sanu could have a decent performance. I wouldn't expect him to have a blow-up performance, but he did have 5 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown last week. So, if both Jones and A.J. Green are out here, I could see him putting up, wide receiver 3 numbers, definitely, maybe eking into the top 20.
Yeah, if AJ Green is out, which it looks like he probably will be, I might put him in. I think I'll probably put him in my top 25. Sanu. I don't love Sanu without AJ Green in the lineup. I don't think he's as talented as Golden Tate.
Yeah, I would much rather have Golden Tate in there than Mohamed Sanu, but he could be a sneaky play this week with the rest of the pass catchers dinged up there. Another receiver that's dinged up. This is the week of dinged up receivers. Vincent Jackson is dealing with a bit of a rib issue. Did not practice today. What are you hearing about Vincent Jackson? It didn't sound like it was too serious, but this is something maybe people should keep an eye on.
Yeah, it sounds like every receiver, every big-time receiver is getting injured in some way or another. So look out if you're a number one receiver right now. But yeah, I don't think I'm too down on Jackson this week because of this injury. We'll see tomorrow what happens in practice. It sounds more like, he hurt his ribs. We should probably just rest him or something. He was starting to come on last week. He scored a couple touchdowns in the past couple weeks. Or I don't think he scored last week. I think he just had a big yardage game. And he's starting to kind of have that chemistry that he had last year with Mike Glennon. So I really like him going forward. Hopefully the injury is minor.
Yeah, hopefully. And it sounds like Mike Evans might be back this week from his groin injury, even though they have a Week 7 bye, the Bucs. So if either of these injuries start to take a turn for the worse, the Bucs might decide to rest these guys and get them rested up through the bye week. But it sounds like both of these guys are going to play this week.
I'd be more surprised if Evans goes, to be honest. It didn't look good earlier this week, and with the bye coming up, why risk it, right? But we have a guest in your shot.
Yes, my daughter has decided to sneak out of her bed and join us on the show tonight. So we have a extra special guest host, extra-year-old daughter. Hi, who would you start, Kaya? Would you start Vincent Jackson or Mike Evans? Okay, why don't you come sit next to me and do the show with me, okay? You want to go sit in that chair over there?
So
come sit with me.
So speaking of guys that are injured, I think that big bummer for me, a guy I was championing all preseason, Rashad Jennings was injured last week. He sprained his MCL. Hopefully it's not too bad. They say it didn't need surgery, so he was confident he'd be back soon. I'm of the opinion that he's going to miss the next 2 weeks because the Giants have a Week 8 bye. So I'm huge on Andre Williams, especially this week against the Eagles defense. What do you think?
Yeah, I could see Andre Williams having a couple of big weeks in Week 6 and 7 before the Giants get that bye in Week 8. I really like him a lot this week. There's a few running backs that are kind of filling in for 2 or 3 weeks for injured starters, and Andre Williams is one of those guys. Maybe after we talk about a couple of these other guys, there's a little teaser. Maybe we can rank these guys where we think their value is, either long term and this week. But Andre Williams, I think, is in for a big day this week, and you need to get him in your lineup for sure. Another guy who went down was Monte Ball. He's got a groin injury. And he's not going to need surgery, but it sounds like he may miss 2 to 3 games here. I think this is the big mystery question of the week in fantasy for fantasy owners. This is a crazy scoring offense. Surely one of these running backs is going to come out with some fantasy goodness, but which of these 3 guys is it going to be? Is it Ronnie Hillman? Is it C.J. Anderson? Or is it Juwan Thompson? What do you think, Alex? This is a tough one.
I think the Broncos are running a shell game at running back until Monte Ball comes back. I don't know. Today we heard that Peyton Manning was, he gave kind of Ronnie Hillman a vote of confidence, and so it seems like he's the guy. And he had a pretty nice week last week. But C.J. Anderson looked pretty decent in limited time earlier this season. He was inactive last week for some reason, but he's going to be active this week. And then there's Thompson. Who had the touchdown last week. So I don't trust any of these guys, to be honest. I mean, even if it's for starters, they're playing the Jets. Yes, they gave up like 7,000 yards to undrafted rookie Brandon Oliver last week, but they were the number 1 rush defense heading into that game, and I expect them to button up a little bit this week. So I don't know that I would start any of them this week.
Yeah, and I don't think I would either. Here's the thing. Ball was the clear starter for a while, and he actually hadn't really ever gotten going this season. If I had to pick one of these three guys, I'm going to go with C.J. Anderson. It's kind of a
Oh,
random thing,
the
but
pea is not under the shell. Sorry, the little whatever it is. The marble.
you didn't find the Queen of Diamonds.
No.
Yeah, I think the reason C.J. Anderson's been inactive is not necessarily because he's a bad player, is because he doesn't contribute to special teams the same way that Juwan Thompson does. So Ronnie Hillman seems to be at the top of this depth chart, but I don't have a lot of faith in Ronnie Hillman really having some sort of breakout performance here. If any of them is going to do it, I think it's going to be C.J. Anderson. But I would not necessarily recommend you start C.J. Anderson. They're a little bit enticing this week, though, because all three of these running backs are the $3,000 minimum at DraftKings. Is that enticing enough to dig into one of these guys at that low price?
So I would do one of each if I'm going to do that, and just to gamble that way. But if I had to, if you really forced my hand, I think I would do Hillman this week.
Yeah, I think that's the safer choice since he's been running as the number 2 back all season behind Monte Ball. Let's talk a little bit about some of these Week 5 performances and maybe get our take on whether these good performances or bad performances are going to continue. First off, Austin Davis played at Philadelphia and had a big game. 375 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 30 rushing yards. What did you think of Davis's performance here, and can we expect something like this going forward?
Well, Davis had a huge game, but he had a horrendous first half. I think he fumbled a couple times. I don't know if that second time was in the third quarter, but the Eagles scored on a couple plays with Davis, and he basically got all his work, all that those stats coming back from a huge deficit. That said, he's looked pretty good this year, I think, and proven that he should be the starter. I think Jeff Fisher's going to go with him going forward. And it depends on the matchup. I think that I might actually start him. I had him. I was eking him up in my rankings last week, right until the bitter end. I think he wound up like QB 17, and I was way too low on him still. But part of it is because the Eagles' defense is so bad. So play the matchups. I think that he could have a couple nice games this season.
Yeah, I think he's a good matchup play. Take advantage of those bad passing defenses. Other than that, I would kind of, cool off just a little bit. He's kind of a back-end QB2 still, good for extreme matchup situations. On the other side of the ball in that St. Louis game, we saw LaShawn McCoy. Another disappointing game for him against a defense that's been giving up a fair amount of rushing yards per game. McCoy only had a total of 86 yards and 4 catches for 5 yards. We've seen a few of these games where he's in like the 80s in terms of yards, and I don't think he has a touchdown on the year yet. Are you panicking here?
It's getting to the point where it's a little worrisome. McCoy, I love McCoy. I love watching him play. I think that he's going to turn things around, but that's a gut feeling. I don't know. The offense has been pretty putrid the past couple weeks, to be honest. It's the Eagles didn't score an offensive point in San Francisco, and last week the defense really kind of held them together for much of the game. So hopefully the offense picks things up, and if that happens, I think McCoy is going to be a part of it, and I think he'll turn things around. For me, I think that he will, and I think that he's a good buy low candidate, and especially because he just hasn't done anything in the past several weeks. So if you're going to get him, I think you better get him soon.
Yeah, I would agree with that. McCoy is a great buy low. If you can get him at a value that's outside RB1 value, like if you can get him at say like RB2 value, I think that's a great buy low situation because I think that they're going to figure this out for him eventually. A guy you might be considering starting over him this week is Brandon Oliver. I never thought I'd be saying that, but he had this big breakout game with Donald Brown leaving the game with a concussion. In week 5, he had 19 carries for 114 yards and a touchdown. That's 6 yards per carry. And then he also had 68 receiving yards and a touchdown. That's 182 total yards. And the Jets were supposed to have this great rush defense. So what happened here? Is Brandon Oliver going to just destroy the Oakland defense, the weaker Oakland defense this week?
And based on last week, I expect him to have 250 total yards and 3 touchdowns against the Raiders, because the Raiders have a terrible run. They have a terrible run defense. So, of course, now that everybody's expecting that, Ronnie Brown's going to come in and do all that work this week.
Oh, gosh.
But no, seriously, I like Oliver. I like what I saw. I did a film study on him this week over Bleacher Report, and I liked what I saw. Part of his big game was just the Jets' defense, which had been number 1 coming in. They just kind of were totally beaten up by that offensive line, and then the second half they looked defeated. So you have to take that performance with a grain of salt. But he just looked great. He's very shifty. He's a powerful back with some speed. He's kind of like a Darren Sproles. That nobody's ever said that before, because he's kind of like a mix.
Thought of that.
Yeah, no. The article I wrote's title is he the next Darren Sproles? But he's a good comp that somebody else made, and I mentioned on Twitter or in the article is Kevin Falk. And that's a really pretty good comp, I think, physically for him. So whether or not he kind of sustains that kind of production going forward, it will be interesting to see. But this week, I don't think Ryan Matthews or Donald Brown are going to be back. So it's a really good opportunity. And I think I have him ranked 12th or 13th this week, and I would start him.
Yeah, I definitely would too. I'm flipping over to our ranks really quickly, which you can find over at the9route.com. That's where we have our rankings and all of our related podcasting links and things. I'm looking to see where we have Oliver in our rankings, because I'm curious whether you have him higher or lower than Andre Williams. It looks like I have him higher than Williams, and you have Williams higher than Oliver. These are both great matchups. Tell me why you've got Williams a couple spots ahead of Oliver. You obviously want to start both of them, but you like Williams a little more here.
I'm just a little wary of Oliver just because he came out of nowhere. We knew Williams from the preseason, although Oliver had a pretty good preseason, but Williams was hyped, and we saw what he could do last week when he got the full workload. I guess there's not really a reason that makes him better. I'm not giving a special reason that Oliver didn't have over Williams. So, I think that Williams has a good matchup, equally good. I don't know. I have no reason.
It's close. I mean, they're both.
Put me on the spot.
I put you on the spot. Haha! I got you.
Yes. No, but I think I have him ranked 10th and 13th. So it's really, really close.
Yeah, we're nitpicking here. One of the things that I see is that Oakland's run defense is giving up 158 yards per game, and Philly's only 132. That's both pretty terrible, and Oakland is also giving up more touchdowns per game. So
I will say the Philly pass defense is bad enough to make Oakland's run defense is worse than you're mentioning than Philly's run defense, and the fact that Philly's pass defense is so bad means that the Giants might be throwing the ball more than the Chargers will. So maybe you're right in ranking Oliver higher than me. Oakland's pass defense, at least in the numbers, shows up a little bit better. Philly's pass defense is allowed almost 300 yards per game and 2.5 touchdowns. It is abysmal. Moving along here to the last performance I just wanted to touch on here is Tim Wright, tight end for the Patriots, who seemed to get back on track against Cincinnati this past week. Tim Wright posted a 5-catch, 85-yard, 1-touchdown line against what was supposed to be a pretty good defense here. What do you think about Tim Wright going forward? Is he the next Aaron Hernandez? Can we expect more big performances out of this guy, or is this a little bit of an anomaly here? Well, hopefully it's only on the field if he's the next Aaron Hernandez. But
that's true. Yes.
He had a really great game, and he did it on 19 snaps. So I'm a little bit wary of putting him in going forward. I'd like to see more from him, before I give him an endorsement. It's my endorsement. But
you're gonna give him an endorsement.
He had a good game, and
they might be Alex Emilio tennis shoes.
Emilio endorsement. But yeah, they used him in ways that they used Aaron Hernandez, I thought, and he did a great job. We'll see what he does going forward.
Yeah, I think the snap count there is key. You compare him to other guys kind of in the same range, like, say, a Ladarius Green. I feel like Green is getting a lot more snaps. Even though he hasn't been putting up any kind of gaudy numbers, I think Green has more opportunities than Tim Wright. And I think Wright's going to be used maybe on a game plan situation. Those sneaky Patriots, they'll probably use him one week and not use him the next week. So I'd be careful about using Wright in your lineup. You may get burned in that one. So a few other rankings we've got here. We've got a couple of players at each position where our rankings differ. Kirk Cousins. I am back on the Kirk Cousins bandwagon a little bit here. I have him at QB 17, and you're like, no way. I don't want to touch this guy with a 10-foot pole. He did all right against Seattle, right? I mean, they didn't win the game, but, he did all right there.
No, he didn't. He got lucky. He had a couple of deep throws that Seattle blew, and that was it. He looked awful for most of the game, so I don't really like him. He's going up against Arizona, which has a pretty good defense on the road this time. He was at home against Seattle, and going all the way west, so I don't like him this week.
The thing that I noticed is that Arizona, I thought, had a really great pass defense. It's their rush defense that's really strong. Their pass defense has allowed 310 yards per game and 2 touchdowns each game, which I think is only second to Jacksonville. So I saw that and I was like, oh, maybe Kirk Cousins could take advantage of this, especially since Arizona's probably going to bottle up Alfred Morris in this game.
Yeah, but I mean, who has Arizona faced? They just got off a butt whooping against against Peyton Manning. That totally inflates those average statistics.
That's fair. It does need to be normalized a bit with an iterative solve to figure out whether it's a true measure or not. This is true.
So what you're saying is Kirk Cousins is just as good as Peyton Manning.
That is my point exactly. I'm glad you read between the lines there. That was clear. I'm pretty sure that was clear in what I was saying. What about Matt Ryan? You're all in on Matt Ryan this week. Hey,
he's my number 1 quarterback.
Yeah. I got the jersey right here. I'm excited about that. I hope he's the number 1 quarterback this week. The Falcons are my second favorite NFL team next to the Dolphins. Why number 1? I've got him at number 5.
I mean, we were both high on him this week. I like him a lot. He's much better at home than he is on the road, and he's put up big numbers at home this year, and he's going up against a Chicago defense that hasn't been very good. There are a lot of injuries in that defense, and they got shredded by Aaron Rodgers a couple weeks ago. So I think that at home with Julio Jones, he's got the ankle, but he's working out pretty well, and I think Harry Douglas is back. Roddy White's playing well. I think he's going to have a big game.
Yeah, I see a big game for Ryan as well. A guy you don't see such a big game for is DeMarco Murray at Seattle. It's the crazy, dangerous 12th man, Murray going to Seattle. But this is like fantasy's the golden boy right now. He's the number 1 running back. How far do you ding a number 1 running back stud against Seattle in this really tough matchup?
Well, I still think you have to start him. I have him at 14th this week at running back, so that means you have to start him. I do think that Seattle poses a problem on the road defensively. The Seahawks haven't been as good on the road, but at home they've been pretty stout against the run especially. So I don't really love Murray. I think they're going to try to, also the Cowboys have been talking about reducing his workload because he's on pace for like ridiculous 400 some odd touches this year. So, I'm wary of him this week. I think he might have a depressed week.
Yeah, I think he could have a depressed week. I've got him at running back 6. I'd still keep him in my top 10 at least. I mean, either way, you're starting this guy, but it's sort of a question of whether you like his value in, say, daily fantasy sports or not. How about Ahmad Bradshaw? He's at Houston this week, and I really like this matchup. Usually Houston has a scary run defense, at least they have in previous years, and this year they're letting a little bit more through. They're averaging, letting over 130 yards per game get through their defensive line, and they're not as scary as they have been in the past. I kind of like Ahmad Bradshaw in this matchup. I've got him at running back 13. But you're not so hot on him. What are you seeing here that you're concerned about with Bradshaw?
Well, he's had a good year, but he's he's got he's not I'm not a big fan of his usage this year. He's only been on the field for 18.5% of his team, or not on the field, but he's only gotten 18.5% of the what I call his team fantasy scoring opportunities, which are basically touches all the touches that he's had. Targets, well, targets plus touches. Sorry, so. His high output in fantasy is a product of the way they used him around the goal line. He scored 4 touchdowns, receiving touchdowns, which is more than he had scored his entire career to this season. And I just don't see that. And we saw already the beginnings of his fantasy falling off a cliff last week. He didn't do that well. So I don't trust him at all going forward. I think that Trent Richardson is going to get more touches, as much as everybody hates that, and I think Ahmad Bradshaw is kind of a boomer bust guy.
Yeah, I really like how they're using Bradshaw in the passing game here. He's the ninth best fantasy points per game scorer in non-PPR this year, and so it's hard for me to keep him out of my top 20. But it is going to be interesting to see how he and Richardson, how their usage continues this year, and whether Bradshaw can continue to score touchdowns in this offense. What about Michael Floyd of Arizona going up against Washington? It sounds like Carson Palmer may be back this week. It's still a little bit up in the air. Tell me why you like Floyd here. You like him a little bit more than I do. And how does the quarterback situation impact your ranking of Floyd?
Well, I will drop him if it's not Palmer this week, because that means it's going to be Logan Thomas, who was 1 of 8 passing last week. and that one was a very long touchdown to Andre Ellington, but otherwise looked terrible. Either he or Dennis Dixon will be starting this week. So, but if it's Carson Palmer, which I'm hearing, or everybody local has over there has kind of has a good feeling about it, then I like Floyd a lot. I like him a lot against the Washington defense, which is pretty soft. Although last week they kind of we're pretty good against the pass against Seattle, but that's because part of the reason is all those penalties that they took away. They took away 3 touchdowns from Percy Harvin. I don't think I mentioned that today.
Washington seems really good about enticing the other team into committing penalties, and they also seem good at hurting other players. Last year I felt like every game they were hurting some opponent's big player. So Washington's got a kind of an odd thing going on over there.
Yeah. But the pass defense is just not very good for Washington. They're going to be on the road. I think that Floyd is going to bounce back in a big way if Palmer is the quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's a big caveat, something to watch closely there. And then Sammy Watkins is another guy you're high on this week versus New England. They're playing in Buffalo. I've got him at wide receiver 35. You have him at 25. So I'm kind of lukewarm, and you're more like, yeah, you should get him in your lineup. Maybe like Calvin Johnson owners are looking at, a guy like Sammy Watkins to get into their lineup. Tell me about Watkins.
He says he's 100% healthy, and he's been on the field a ton. I think I read somewhere that he was 96% of all offensive snaps he's been on the field this year, despite having that rib issue. And so now he says he's 100% healthy. He's got Kyle Orton, who I think is a better quarterback. And last week he had a decent week, and I think that they're going to utilize him in new and creative ways, perhaps on receiver screens, like a lot of Bills fans have been demanding. I've seen. So I like him this week. I don't love him. I don't think he could have explode, but a 25th wide receiver, I think that means he's startable in most formats.
Yeah, I think he's going to be inconsistent, but that could be good for your day gaming lineup if you want to take a chance on him. I think he's going to have really big weeks and really low lows as well. So, Alex, I have to get your expert opinion here because you are the #1 tight end ranker over at Fantasy Pros, and so we got to get at least one tight end question in here. Congratulations, by the way.
Woohoo! These are things that you're helping me discover because I didn't even realize that till today.
Yeah, Alex is also the #2 kicker ranker. He's in a heated battle with our friend Ross Miles over at Pro Football Focus. So send him all your kicker and tight end questions because Alex is the expert at both of those things.
Just don't look at any of my rankings for other positions. That's all I have to say.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine. So the tight end ranking where we differ is I've got Dwayne Allen of the Colts at number 10 tight end this week, and you've got him at 17. You're not quite as high on him. I'm going to flip over to the rankings here on the 9route.com and see just who you have ahead of him in your tight end rankings that I'm like, about. So tell me about Dwayne Allen.
Well, Will Carroll, the injury expert, he was mentioning today, and he's a big Indy fan as well. He was mentioning today about they're going up against the Houston Texans and how he expects the tight ends to stay back and help with J.J. Watt a lot this week. So that really affected what I was thinking with Dwayne Allen. I think that he could have a down week just because he's going to be used as pass rushing help or help for against the pass rush rather. The other thing is that Dwayne Allen is seeing less than 10% of his team's targets, and so is Coby Fleener. So he's kind of on this wave of touchdowns that is helping him his fantasy stock. As soon as those dry up, he's going to have a really bad week. So I expect that to happen this week. I don't think that he's going to have a very good week.
Yeah, and I'm looking at some of the guys that you have ahead of Allen. It's guys like Zach Ertz, Ladarius Green, Vernon Davis. You know, I could see these guys outperforming Dwayne Allen. I feel like I've been so disappointed with some of these guys that I'm kind of over them for a little bit. You know, I think I'd like to see Jordan Reed maybe get out there. He's a guy that I have ahead of kind of one spot below Allen, but I'm hopeful to see a comeback from this week. But you're maybe thinking that maybe it's more of a Niles Paul game this week until Reed kind of gets back up to speed maybe. So maybe Niles Paul is another guy ahead of Dwayne Allen. That Washington tight end situation is definitely one to watch. Let's dive into some daily fantasy sports stuff. We talked a little bit last week with Bob Harris, our great guest there, Bob Harris, about some daily fantasy sports, and you guys were razzing me for only starting one lineup each week, and that's mostly because I was lazy. So you guys encouraged me to start multiple lineups, and I'm really glad that you did because my primary lineup did terrible, but I came out ahead on the day because I played 7 different lineups last week. So thank you for that bit of advice, Mr. Miglio.
I wasn't even giving you advice. I was just telling you what I did.
Well, it paid off. It paid off. And also, it's interesting, I kind of force myself to have different lineups by playing the different time frames, right? It's like you can play the ones that start on Thursday night, the ones that are just the Sunday afternoon games. You can play the ones that are just the primetime games. And so I kind of entered the different formats, which sort of forces you to pick different values on different teams. So that helped me out a lot and kind of forced me to get guys like Andre Ellington into my lineups or the Green Bay Packers defense into my lineups on Thursday night. And that really paid off for me. So if you're thinking about mixing it up with your lineups, one way to do it is by playing the different time frames. I usually play about 50 head-to-head matchups each week, and so that also helps me sort of distribute those over the different time frames, and kind of diversify, if you will. And so I've been enjoying doing that. What do you think, Alex? How many lineups do you play? How are you doing with daily fantasy sports so far this year?
I didn't have a good week last week, but that'll happen. So I'm not. I'll bounce back hopefully. I usually play about 10 or 11 lineups a week. So and I do enjoy doing like the Thursday night and then the regular and then the afternoon and the prime time. That all is pretty fun. So just take my lumps and move on.
Yeah. I think that's everyone's gonna have a down week, so that it's like don't get on tilt and make weird sort of betting choices or bankrolling choices the following week. One of the other things that I've been having fun doing is sort of hovering over the join button right as contests are about to start, because you'll find several of these guaranteed prize pools aren't filled up. Like there were a couple at DraftKings this past week that I noticed and jumped in at the last second, where it was like only like 40,000 out of like 55,000 was filled, or like only 4,000 out of 5,000 was filled. It's like there's no rake that the site is getting if it's only 80% filled. So I like sort of hovering over that last second entry for overlay, and that's really fun. I don't know if you do any of that, Alex, but I recommend it.
It sounds like a lot of work just to be just sitting there waiting for for the.
It kind of reminds me of like the olden days when I would like look for, say, Star Wars toys on eBay or something like that. And it's
Sounds like an eBay. Yes.
it's like you don't want to like put your real bid in until like 10 seconds or like 5 seconds before the bidding closes. It's kind of like that. You're just like hovering anxiously over the button. Join, yeah. So yeah, go for that. It's a rush. Let's talk about some of our values at DraftKings and FanDuel this week. DraftKings is bringing back their Millionaire Maker contest. They made someone a millionaire last week. They're going to do it again this week in Week 6.
It was not me.
No, it was not me either, although I did have a good overall week. Tell me, Alex, who are a couple of players you're excited about at DraftKings this week?
You know what? I lost my second quarterback. You were excited about Tom Brady, and I don't remember. You know, I didn't write it down who my guys were. So Tom Brady at 6,000 is a pretty good price. You know, he bounced back last week. He's gonna be at Buffalo, and Buffalo has a pretty good pass rush, and that's where Brady kind of falls apart when there's a good pass rush. So I'm a little bit skittish on playing him, but not a bad price at 6,000. I don't have any of my own because I didn't write it down. Sorry.
It's all good, man. How about at running back? We talked a little bit about the Denver running backs probably not being worth the 3K value. We've also got Andre Ellington, after his big game, is still only 5,100, and he's playing Washington this week. Do you like Ellington this week?
Yeah, I like him a lot. I was going to put him in before you did, so so you beat me to the
I beat you to it.
Yes. I like him a lot. 5,100. He had the big game last week. Aside from that long touchdown pass that he caught, he played pretty well overall. And he's got a pretty good matchup against Washington this week. And another guy that I like, you know, you mentioned all the Denver running backs. Again, that's a shell game, so be careful. But Stephen Ridley, he's only 3,700, and he's going up against Buffalo again with a pretty good defensive line. But he had a pretty big read last week, and so I'm a little surprised that he's so inexpensive.
Yeah, at receiver, I like Deshaun Jackson after that big game. He's going up against Arizona again, maybe it's because they've had tough opponents, but I kind of like that matchup at Arizona this week. He's only 4,900 at DraftKings. Tell me about a receiver you like.
I like, actually, Brian Hartline this week against a Green Bay Packers defense that has given up quite a bit of fantasy points, I think. And, you know, if between him and Mike Wallace is a pretty good price too, but Hartline, he's been a favorite of Ryan Tannehill's in the past. He's only 3,800. And if you're going to gamble, with a guy that's inexpensive, Hartline's a pretty good gamble. So I like him at 3,800. Another one, Mohamed Sanu, if A.J. Green is out, I think he's a great price at 5,300. Even though I don't think he's going to have a huge game, but I think that at that price you got to start him if A.J. Green's out. And then Jeremy Curley, who's had a couple of really rough weeks, as have the entire Jets offense. But I think this week against Denver at home, they're going to have to pass the ball a lot, obviously. So, and Curley stands to benefit. He had a really nice game against the Packers a few weeks ago, where he almost caught the game-tying touchdown that was called back because of this stupid timeout that they took, and it was a really nice play. So I think that this could be one of those big weeks for Curley that nobody expects.
Yeah, and it looks like you've got, pointing out that Gronkowski's a pretty good value this week at only 5,800 at DraftKings, and I like Larry Donnell at only 3,500.
Let's just hope he doesn't start himself this week, because he did last week, and it was just really awful.
Yes, yeah, he's hurting himself there. And then a couple of defenses that you noticed there are the Niners at 3,200 and the Jaguars against Tennessee at 2,600. I like that Jacksonville pick there. It's a little risky, but I tend to go risky on defenses and kind of pay low for them.
Yeah, they're talking about starting rookie Zach Mettenberger over at Tennessee. And, I don't know if Jake Locker's going to go. He's kind of iffy. And Jacksonville's due for a good game in general. I think that they're not going to go 0-16, and this is a pretty good game for them. I mean, Tennessee's not very good, so it could be one of those weird games where Jacksonville has the upset on the road and they score a defensive touchdown or something.
Yeah, I could see that. Now let's flip gears over to FanDuel. You've picked out some players over here. I'll confess I don't play quite as often over at FanDuel, so I want to hear what your picks over at FanDuel are.
I only play slightly more often than you do. No offense to the good people at FanDuel. We really like their site, but I can only do so much. So anyway, I do play though, and a couple of the guys that I like are Mike Glennon at 6,400. I think it's a pretty good price. He's going up against Baltimore, which has been, giving up some fantasy points this year. And then Eli Manning at 7,200. That's a really good price for a guy who I have in my top 6, I think, and he's going up against Philadelphia. So I don't know. I think that's probably the best value.
Yeah, those sound great. And then a couple of the running backs that we mentioned before, Williams for the Giants, also playing Philly, and then Brandon Oliver playing Oakland. They are, both in the low 6,000s, which seems like a good value for guys that are in the top 15 at running back this week. And then you've got at wide receiver, your boy Percy Harvin. You're going back to the well there, Percy Harvin.
One of those touchdowns is going to count one of these weeks. So, actually, it's funny. It's actually karma. Because the 51-yard touchdown run that he had in Week 1 should not have been a touchdown. He stepped out of bounds and they missed it. So I guess that everybody's paying for that now.
He's forever doomed.
He's going up against Dallas at home. He's not a great price, but 7,600 is a pretty good price. I think that they're going to try to get him involved. More and more, and it's a pretty good price. Dallas's defense isn't great, so I like him. And as another guy like Ruben Randall. Again, with going up against the Eagles, he's a good price at 5,900. I'm not sure that I would go with Odell Beckham just because he had 5 targets last week. It wasn't that many, and he's unproven commodity. It was kind of like they surprised the Falcons with Beckham last week. So I'm a little skittish about playing him until he provides some consistency. And then Brian Hartline again, he's 4,700, a good price against Green Bay.
Yeah, I think the moral is that one of these Giants is going to go off against a really bad Eagles defense. Pick that guy and you'll be in good shape, or maybe pick 2 of them and you'll be in good shape. At tight end, we definitely want to get your take on this because you are the #1 tight end expert over at Fantasy Pros. Hit me with your tight end picks.
That's not going to last at this point. Now that you've mentioned it, I'm going to wind up.
No, it's a good thing. I'm trying not to mock it or anything. This is going to happen. You're going to keep it the whole season. It's going to happen.
Yes. Well, let's hope. But anyway, I really like. I don't know why Martellus Bennett is only 5,900 over at FanDuel, and he's playing against Atlanta, which is not a very good defense. So. That's a great. I would roll with him. I don't think that there's any other choice really. And then Luke Wilson at 5,000 against Dallas, who has given up a ton of fantasy points to tight ends. Last week, notwithstanding, when Garrett Graham had 1 catch for 3 yards. But aside from that, I think Wilson's got a good matchup.
Yeah, I like the Bennett pick there a lot. I would be rolling with Bennett for sure against Atlanta. Okay, well, I guess we got to talk about kickers because you're like some hotshot kicker ranker here. Who's your guy?
It didn't work out that great last week because they scored all those touchdowns, but it was okay, I guess.
So Greg Zuerlein, you think this week?
Yeah, he's done well against San Francisco in the past, and they're playing at home. I actually have the Rams upsetting the 49ers, which they've done in recent years. So I think that Zuerlein could be a big part of that.
Ooh, interesting. I like that. That's good. All right, let's answer some Twitter questions. We got some good ones from. Thank you to our listeners for sending them in. We appreciate you listening, and we want to make sure we answer your questions. And we'll wrap this up quickly in the next 5 minutes or so. Brad is wondering if he should panic on Brandon Marshall. Are you worried about Brandon Marshall, or is some of this ups and downs related to sort of his health a little bit more than his playing time here?
Yeah, I understand why people might be down on Marshall after the last couple of weeks, but I'm not. He's kind of Jay Cutler's BFF, so I think that he'll be back. His injury was affecting him, I think, and just not everybody's going to have a great week every week. So even the great receivers. So I think he'll be fine.
Yep, I do too. I think it's going to be cool. Sean is asking if he should start Garcon or T.Y. Hilton this week.
Before I answer that, you can find those answers if you go to the9route.com because we have our rankings there. So check those out, and you can see whether or not we think you should start them. But I have Garcon ranked higher than Hilton this week. I don't know about you.
I also have Garcon higher than Hilton this week, and I think that part of the concern there maybe is maybe the matchup there a little bit. But again, I think Arizona's pass defense is a little bit overrated, so I would go with Garcon there for sure. And then Mike is asking, is Travis Kelce going to be a consistent producer for Kansas City this season? And I would say he is not going to be consistent, but I really like him the rest of the year. What's your take?
Well, I mean, it's 3 weeks in a row now where he's scored, I believe. So there's that. Last week he was saved by that touchdown because he didn't do anything else. He had one other catch, but it was a really bad matchup, and he delivered something. And I think that's what you're looking for in a guy in when it comes to consistency. He's not going to be Rob Gronkowski and produce those kinds of numbers every week, but I think that you can count on him. I think that he's going to get 5 or 6 targets a week, and he's got the kind of the athleticism and the more that Alex Smith has confidence in him, he's gonna produce even more. So I'd roll with him. I mean, unless you have Martellus Bennett or Jimmy Graham or Rob Gronkowski, I think that Kelce is a pretty good option to roll with every week.
Yeah, I think he's a top 10 tight end. I mean, tight end is kind of fluky, a little bit inconsistent after you get out of those top 5 anyway, and I think Kelce's much more consistent than most of your other options outside of like the top 5 guys that Alex mentioned there. So yeah, I think he's going to be a great tight end for the rest of the season. And then we got some kicker questions because you've been doing so well.
You opened the floodgates. I
opened the floodgates. I take your tight end ranking very seriously, and I think you're doing a great job with that. The kicker thing, I completely mock and think that it's just like whatever, like kicker ranking. This is.
You keep trying to goad me into spending more than 30 seconds on my kicker rankings.
Yeah. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. Just keep rolling with
it. Exactly. I'm like, hey, maybe I should tweak my kicker rankings. No, I never tweak them. Leave them alone.
Yeah. Your first instinct is your best instinct on kickers. So Ann is asking us, where would you rank Prater this week? So Matt Prater, formerly of the Denver Broncos, was cut and then re-signed by Detroit. Hopefully Detroit's kicking game isn't completely cursed because I think their kickers have missed 8 out of 12 field goals this season. Hopefully Prater will be better than that. Do you like Prater this week?
I believe Prater is on the road against the Minnesota Vikings this week. So he's not kicking indoors. He's not kicking in Mile High Stadium. And he hasn't done anything for the past 5 weeks. So I don't really like him that much. I think that he's a decent option. But if you're streaming kickers, there's so many better kickers this week, I think. So I have him ranked like 18th or something like that.
I think that's fair. And then, someone who's really excited about Matt Prater, Antonio, is wondering if he should drop Dan Bailey as a streaming option here because he's scared that Bailey is going to lay an egg here at Seattle this week. What do you think about trying to stream Prater instead of Dan Bailey?
I do think that Bailey is not a great option this week on the road in Seattle, but I don't know that I would drop him for Matt Prater. I think that I have them ranked pretty close together, and I think I have Bailey slightly ahead of Prater. So, Bailey, as much as if you're going to stream a kickers, but if you're going to keep a kicker, you're going to want to keep Bailey over Prater the rest of the season. So, I would just go ahead and roll with Bailey and see what happens.
Yeah, I would as well. I think Bailey's good enough that you want to just kind of hang on to him the rest of the season there. So that's all of our questions. That is all of our content. Alex, do you have any articles we should be on the lookout for? Any parting thoughts to get people psyched for Week 6?
Well, I mentioned the Brandon. I keep wanting to call him Darren Oliver. I even tweeted that because it's like mixing Darren Sproles and Brandon Oliver. Darren Oliver it's a left-handed pitcher for the Texas Rangers and Orioles among other teams. But so I posted my film study on Brandon Oliver over at Bleacher Report, and I have it pinned on the top of my Twitter. I enjoyed writing it, so check it out if you can.
That sounds awesome. We'll definitely check that out. Immediately after the show, I'm going to go post 20 new $1 head-to-heads over at DraftKings. So if you want to play against me at DraftKings and see which one of my many multiple lineups you get to play against, after you listen to this podcast, go check out DraftKings and see if you can match up with me in a head-to-head matchup this week.
What's your username?
My username? It's Austin NFL. I don't have one of those like cool, like hip, like I'm like a hacker kind of names like most people. I'm just like, yep, it's me. You can find all my answers on Twitter. Play against me. Do you have like some cool name? You don't have to divulge it. You have a cool name over there?
I don't know if I have one at DraftKings, but I usually fall back to my olden days. My gamer tag from olden days is Zero Dev. Because I was going for something. You ever watched the movie Hackers?
Nope.
It's an awesome movie that you should watch from the 90s. I mean, really, if you want everything you need to know about hacking, you need to watch that movie.
That sounds terrible. I know this. This is a Unix system.
No, you know what? Actually, it's a fun movie, but you probably won't like it. Anyway, there's a hacker in the movie whose name is Zero Cool, and I wanted to do that, but somebody had already taken that, obviously, so I went with Zero Dev, and that's what I use usually in a place where I have to decide a separate username.
Ah, I see. I got you. Well, my name is not nearly as cool as that, and you can find me pretty easily. I'm posting my games head-to-head at DraftKings now. So, thank you all for listening to The 9 Route. You can find all of our content over at the9route.com. Be sure to subscribe over at iTunes or at Stitcher so that you get every weekly episode. We air every Wednesday night at 9, The 9 Route at 9 Pacific Time. Every week to give you fantasy advice. To chat with Alex on Twitter, he's at Alex Emilio. You can find me at Austin NFL. Again, not a cool name, that's just me. And you can find our articles at footballguys.com, and Alex is also at Bleacher Report. Thank you for listening to The 9 Route, and until next time, may your players stay healthy, your sleepers wake up, and your Monday nights be filled with miraculous comebacks. Good night.
Amen.